Imagine a world where, silently, a cultural phenomenon spreads like a genetic seed, not within biological code, but within the collective psyche of civilization itself. Homes that once echoed with the laughter of children have become modern temples of silence, interrupted only by the soft footsteps of four paws, occasional barking, and the jingling of collars. Parks, once territories of playful innocence, are now arenas for canine socialization. And behind this seemingly innocent gesture of love toward animals lies a far darker, deeper truth that most would hate to dare confront. The symbolic replacement of children with dogs is not a casual choice but a psychic reflection of a civilization teetering on the edge of existential collapse. Carl Jung, master of the shadow, would say that whatever a society rejects consciously resurfaces through the collective unconscious, disguised, camouflaged, often in forms unnoticed even by the keenest observers. The archetype of the child, symbol of the future, continuity, hope, and both biological and spiritual transcendence, is being slowly buried. And in its place rises the archetype of the submissive companion, of love without conflict, of a bond devoid of mirrors that reflect one's own darkness. Behind the sweet eyes of a dog, many seek that which they cannot bear to face in a child, the mirror of their own failures, limitations, and unresolved traumas. Loving a dog is easy. It does not confront you. It does not demand psychic evolution. It does not activate your narcissistic wounds. It does not force you to deal with your own shadow inheritance. Loving a child, however, is an initiatory journey. It drags you into a brutal rite of passage where your shadow, ego, wounds, and masks are mercilessly exposed day after day. Jung taught that whatever we avoid in the external world is merely a reflection of what we repress in the internal world. When a society starts rejecting motherhood and fatherhood, it isn't simply making a lifestyle choice. It is, in truth, collectively projecting a refusal to mature, to face life's natural cycles, to transcend its own psychic stagnation. In this context, the dog becomes the perfect substitute. It represents love that does not judge, affection without mirrors, presence without the demand for internal transformation. In ancient times, when myths still guided societies, raising children was more than a biological duty. It was a sacred mission. The child carried the continuity not only of blood but of spirit, culture, and the tribe's gods. Today, in the liquid modernity described by Zygmunt Bauman, where everything is temporary, disposable, and fleeting, even the meaning of procreation has dissolved. In its place, we adopt emotional substitutes, molded by industry, consumer culture, and the fear of psychic pain. And this fear of pain is the true engine of the phenomenon. Having children forces any human being to traverse their own inner hells. It forces one to revisit the relationship with their own parents, to face childhood traumas, to rescue the forgotten parts of one's psyche, and, above all, to renounce the comfortable narcissism of living solely for oneself. The dog, on the other hand, offers immediate love, free from that hidden contract with one's own soul. From a symbolic standpoint, this social movement is an archetypal regression. It is the refusal of the hero's journey, described by Joseph Campbell, in which the individual is called to leave the comfort zone, face challenges, descend into darkness, and return transformed. By choosing pets over children, society remains stuck in the stage of refusing the call. It opts for the known, the easy, the safe, the painless, and, like every refusal of the call, it exacts a devastating psychic price: nameless depression, chronic anxiety, existential emptiness, and crises of meaning. Historically, humanity has always been at war with its own spiritual decline. Civilizations that embraced hedonism and rejected intergenerational responsibility collapsed. Rome, at the peak of its decadence, showed similar patterns. Families opting out of parenthood, cults of pleasure, the replacement of rites of passage with empty entertainment. What appeared to be a personal choice was, in fact, a harbinger of the end. Psychologically, choosing a dog over a child often means unconsciously choosing not to confront one's own shadow. A dog doesn't require you to be a role model. It doesn't question your choices. It doesn't hand your mistakes back to you years later in the form of traumas, neuroses, or existential questions. A child inevitably becomes your cruelest and most sacred mirror. They are simultaneously your masterpiece and your judgment. There is also a profound cultural layer to this phenomenon. The contemporary narrative, fed by media, the entertainment industry, and ideological movements, has constructed an image of parenthood as a prison, a burden, an impediment to personal fulfillment. The message is clear: be free, travel, achieve, consume, explore, but do not tether yourself, do not sacrifice, do not generate life. This message, disguised as empowerment, is in fact the cruelest psychic trap of modernity. For what is not lived in the conscious plane returns through the unconscious, manifesting as anguish, as illness, as an all-consuming void. Carl Jung warned that the price of ignoring the soul, calls, is to be devoured by one Ebe's own shadow, and a society that rejects the archetype of the child is, unknowingly, feeding the forces of psychic death. Where there is no birth, there is no future. Where there is no continuity, only stagnation remains. Nihilism, the endless search for temporary fillers that never satisfy. The consumption of pets, experiences, and fleeting pleasures becomes merely anesthesia for a pain that, at its core, is spiritual. The greatest irony is that many who choose dogs over children are unconsciously trying to embody the archetype of the caregiver, the progenitor, but without the pain this archetype demands. It's like desiring fire without getting burned, desiring light without walking through the darkness. The dog, then, becomes a symbolic simulation of motherhood and fatherhood, a parenthood without mirrors, a motherhood without sacrifice, a comfortable illusion of transcendence without the price of real psychic transformation. But the psyche is not naive. It knows, deep within the subconscious, that this choice carries a cost, and that cost manifests in the alarming rise of psychological disorders, existential crises, epidemic levels of depression, and a widespread sensation that something is profoundly wrong, even if few can name it. When we observe this trend at scale, it becomes clear that it is not merely an individual choice, but a civilizational symptom. It is the silent scream of a humanity that, by refusing to generate life, is symbolically declaring its own spiritual bankruptcy. The dog, in this context, is not the problem. It is merely the symptom. The true problem is the refusal to face the shadow, to engage with the natural cycles of existence, to accept that fully living requires pain, sacrifice, responsibility, and transcendence. And yet, there is a way out. But it does not lie in easy answers, in pop culture slogans, or in hollow self-help mantras. It lies in the return to the sacred, in the resurrection of rites of passage, in the acceptance that life does indeed demand sacrifice. But it is precisely this sacrifice that transforms us, that gives us meaning, that connects us to the eternal. Having children is not merely a biological act. It is a metaphysical one. It is a declaration of faith in the future, in life itself, in the very essence of humanity. When humanity trades children for dogs, it is unconsciously crying for help. It is whispering between the lines that it can no longer bear to face its own pain, its own emptiness. And until this cry is heard, until the archetype of the child is restored within the collective psyche, we will remain anesthetized, sickened, lost, seeking in canine love what only the courageous confrontation with our own shadow could ever give us. And perhaps it is precisely within this void, this pain, this deep disconnection, that humanity might one day rediscover the path back to itself. For it is in the densest darkness that the light of the unconscious begins to shine. And perhaps when we finally understand that the emptiness of the crib cannot be filled with pause, but with the courage to live, to love, and to generate, we may awaken from this collective trance and remember that we are part of a cycle far greater, far more sacred, and far more beautiful than any form of escape could ever offer.